The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy of the forest, casting dappled light on the winding path. Alicia adjusted the straps of her camera bag, her boots crunching against the fallen leaves. This trip was her escape, a chance to reconnect with nature and capture rare shots of birds she had only seen in books. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, distant bird calls, and the occasional scamper of small creatures. But Alicia's focus was razor sharp. Today she was determined to find the elusive scarlet falcon, a bird whispered about among wildlife enthusiasts. As she ventured deeper, the familiar noises of the forest began to fade, replaced by an eerie silence. Alicia paused, glancing around. Her instincts, honed from years of solo excursions, told her something was off. She adjusted her lens and snapped a few shots of the towering trees, hoping to shake off the unease. Yet, the silence lingered, wrapping around her like a dense fog. She shook her head, reminding herself that solitude often played tricks on her mind. Alicia's concentration broke when she spotted a cluster of vibrant orchids clinging to a tree trunk. Kneeling to photograph them, she felt the tension ease. As her camera clicked, she whispered to herself, "This is why I do this." For a brief moment, the world was reduced to the intricate beauty of those flowers. Yet, just as she captured her final shot, a faint, unfamiliar sound reached her ears. It wasn't a bird call or the rustling of the wind. It was softer, almost human. Her heart quickened. Alicia straightened and strained to listen. There it was again, faint but unmistakable, the cry of a baby. She froze, her thoughts racing. A baby? Here? She scanned the forest ahead, every fiber of her being on high alert. The cry grew louder, fragile and filled with desperation. Alicia hesitated, a mix of curiosity and fear surging through her. Gripping her camera tightly, she took a tentative step forward, her instincts propelling her toward the source of the sound. The cries grew clearer as Alicia pushed through the undergrowth, her pulse quickening with every step. She moved cautiously, her eyes darting between the dense foliage and the ground. The forest seemed to close in around her, the towering trees casting long, ominous shadows despite the mid-morning light. Each crackle of twigs beneath her boots made her wince, as though the noise could alert something or someone hidden in the depths. Her grip on her camera strap tightened, not as a tool for photography now, but as a potential weapon, a flimsy source of comfort against the unknown. Breaking through a wall of brambles, Alicia came to an abrupt halt. Her breath hitched as her gaze locked onto the scene ahead. In a small clearing, illuminated by a shaft of sunlight, lay a child no older than a year, wrapped in a tattered blanket. But Alicia's attention was drawn not to the child's frail form, but to the creature crouched protectively beside it, a wolf. The animal's thick fur was matted with dirt, its body tense as it stood guard. Its golden eyes met hers, glowing with a mix of warning and curiosity. Alicia's body went cold. The wolf let out a low growl, its lips curling back to reveal sharp teeth. Alicia froze, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might echo through the clearing. The baby let out another wail, its tiny fists flailing in distress. Alicia's instincts screamed at her to back away, but her feet remained rooted to the ground. She had spent years studying animal behavior, enough to know that wolves didn't usually act like this. It wasn't attacking, but its posture was clear. It was ready to defend the child at all costs. The sheer peculiarity of the situation sent her mind reeling. Taking a slow, steady breath, Alicia tried to think. Running would only provoke the wolf, and leaving the child was out of the question. Her eyes darted around the clearing, searching for anything that could help. A nearby branch caught her attention. Sturdy but light enough to wield. She inched backward, her movements deliberate, her gaze never leaving the wolf. The creature watched her closely, its growl fading into a deep rumble. Alicia's mind raced with possibilities, but one thing was certain: this was no ordinary encounter. Alicia crouched low, her every move calculated to avoid startling the wolf. She reached for the branch, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the rough bark. The wolf's eyes tracked her with laser focus, its body coiled like a spring ready to strike. Alicia swallowed hard, her thoughts racing. She needed to show the animal she wasn't a threat, but how? Years of wildlife photography had taught her the importance of body language. Slowly, she lowered her gaze, not submissive, but non-confrontational. The wolf's growl softened, though its stance remained guarded. The baby whimpered again, its cries piercing the silence of the forest. Alicia's heart ached at the sound, a fragile reminder of the stakes. She whispered softly, her voice barely audible, "It's okay, little one. I'll get you out of this." The wolf's ears twitched at her voice, but it didn't move. Alicia steadied herself, forcing her breathing to slow despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She extended the branch toward the ground, rolling it slightly to show she wasn't using it as a weapon. The wolf sniffed the air, its golden eyes flickering between her and the child. Time seemed to stretch as Alicia debated her next move. The wolf didn't attack, but its presence was an unrelenting reminder of the danger. Her mind replayed snippets of animal documentaries she'd seen, strategies for de-escalating tense encounters. She remembered something about using food to pacify wild animals. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out a granola bar, the closest thing she had to bait. She unwrapped it slowly, the crinkling sound drawing the wolf's attention. Breaking off a piece, she tossed it toward the animal. It sniffed the offering, hesitated, then cautiously moved to inspect it. The wolf ate the morsel, its movements measured and deliberate. For the first time, Alicia noticed the limp in its step, the way its hind leg barely touched the ground. The creature was injured, which explained its defensiveness. Encouraged by this small breakthrough, Alicia broke off another piece and tossed it closer to the baby. The wolf followed, lowering its guard just slightly. Alicia took this opportunity to inch closer to the child, her heart pounding as she prayed the delicate balance she'd achieved wouldn't shatter. As the wolf continued to eat the granola, Alicia seized the moment to assess the child. The baby's tiny face was streaked with dirt, and its cries were hoarse, evidence of hours spent in distress. Alicia's chest tightened at the sight. Whatever had led to this child being abandoned here, she knew she couldn't leave it behind. Glancing at the wolf, she felt a flicker of understanding. It wasn't just protecting the baby out of instinct. There was something deeper, almost intentional, in its behavior. But how could she convince it to let her take the child? Alicia's thoughts raced. Her every instinct screamed at her to run for help, but that would mean leaving the child vulnerable. Worse, the wolf might not tolerate her sudden retreat. She had to act carefully and deliberately. Digging through her bag, she pulled out her water bottle and carefully poured a few drops onto her hand. The wolf perked up, watching her movements intently. Alicia slowly extended her hand toward the child, letting the water drip close to its mouth. The baby's tiny lips parted, eagerly seeking the moisture. Encouraged, Alicia poured a little more into the lid and offered it to the wolf as well. The wolf hesitated, but eventually leaned forward, its tongue lapping at the water. Alicia took a steady breath. This fragile act of trust felt monumental. She reached out carefully, her hands trembling as they hovered over the baby. The wolf growled softly, its body tense but not advancing. "I'm trying to help," Alicia murmured, her voice low and steady. The wolf's ears twitched, and after a moment of unbearable stillness, it stepped back slightly, as if granting her permission. With painstaking care, Alicia scooped the child into her arms. The baby whimpered but didn't resist, its tiny fingers clutching at her shirt. Alicia held her breath, waiting for the wolf's reaction. The animal watched her, its golden eyes burning with something she couldn't quite place, acceptance perhaps, or resignation. It stayed close, its limp evident as it moved beside her. Alicia felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about survival anymore. Whatever bond the wolf had with this child, Alicia was now a part of it. She whispered, "Let's get you to safety," and began the careful journey back, the wolf limping silently at her side. As Alicia carefully made her way through the forest, the wolf trailing closely, she couldn't shake the eerie feeling that there was more to this situation than met the eye. The baby had stopped crying, its tiny head resting against her shoulder, but the wolf's unwavering presence kept her on edge. Her eyes scanned the forest for signs of human activity, hoping to find clues about how the child had ended up here. That's when she noticed something peculiar, a trail of footprints leading away from the clearing. The prints were large, deep, and irregular, as if someone had been running while carrying a heavy load. Curiosity warred with caution, but Alicia's resolve won. She followed the trail cautiously, each step revealing more disturbing details. A torn piece of fabric snagged on a branch, stained with what looked like dried blood. A few yards ahead, a talisman carved from wood dangled from a tree, its surface etched with symbols Alicia couldn't recognize. The air seemed heavier here, and Alicia's skin prickled with unease. She recalled stories she'd overheard in the nearby village, a local legend about wolves who protected the forsaken and punished the cruel. The thought sent a chill down her spine. The wolf stopped abruptly, letting out a low growl that reverberated through the silent forest. Alicia froze, clutching the baby tightly. In the distance, faint gunshots echoed, sharp and jarring against the stillness. Her pulse quickened as she realized they weren't alone in the forest. Someone was out there, someone who might have left the baby behind. She glanced at the wolf, which stood alert, its body tense. Whatever threat was out there, the wolf seemed ready to defend both her and the child. Determined not to linger, Alicia pressed on, her mind racing with possibilities. Who had abandoned this baby, and why? The talisman, the wolf's behavior, and the ominous sounds of gunfire painted a picture she couldn't yet decipher. But one thing was clear. This child's life was in danger, and whoever had left those footprints might still be hunting. Gripping the baby tighter and glancing at the wolf for reassurance, Alicia resolved to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing the darkness lurking within the forest. Alicia's heart raced as she clutched the baby closer, her eyes darting toward the direction of the distant gunshots. The wolf beside her let out another low growl, its sharp ears flicking at every faint sound. They needed to move, fast. But the dense forest and the unpredictable presence of the wolf made every step feel like a gamble. Alicia knelt briefly, adjusting her grip on the child and scanning her surroundings for the safest path out. Her instincts, honed from years of outdoor excursions, told her to follow the stream nearby. Water would mask their scent and lead to the edge of the forest. She signaled to the wolf, her movements slow and deliberate. "We need to go," she whispered, unsure if the animal could understand her words, but hoping it would sense her intent. The wolf remained tense, but didn't resist as she began moving toward the stream. Its limping form followed closely, every step cautious. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a soft whimper, and Alicia whispered soothingly, "Shh, it's okay, we'll get out of this." Her voice trembled despite her best efforts to sound calm. Reaching the stream, Alicia stepped carefully into the cold water, its chill biting through her boots. The wolf hesitated at the edge, its injured leg clearly causing pain, but eventually it waded in after her. They moved along the shallow current, each step muffled by the rushing water. Alicia kept her eyes on the dense foliage around them, her senses heightened to every rustle and shadow. The gunshots had stopped, but the silence felt even more unnerving. She wondered if the hunters were tracking them, their steps masked by the forest's natural sounds. As the stream widened and sunlight broke through the canopy, Alicia spotted an old dirt path leading uphill. Relief flooded her. It might lead to the forest's edge. But the wolf suddenly froze, its nose twitching and ears pinned back. Alicia halted too, her breath catching. A distant voice called out, rough and impatient, cutting through the air like a blade. Her mind raced. Whoever was out there wasn't far. Alicia crouched low, pressing the baby close to her chest. "We'll make it," she whispered, more to herself than to her unlikely companions. And with the wolf by her side, she began her final push toward safety.
Alicia's breath caught as voices echoed through the forest, growing louder with each passing second. She crouched low, clutching the baby tightly, her pulse pounding in her ears. The wolf stood alert beside her, its ears swiveling toward the sound. Through the dense foliage, she spotted them. Two men with rifles slung over their shoulders, their expressions sharp and focused. They were tracking something, their eyes scanning the ground. Alicia's stomach churned. These men were not here by accident. Could they be searching for the child, or worse, the wolf? One of the men stopped suddenly, kneeling to examine the footprints by the stream. "They're close," he muttered, pointing toward the trail Alicia had taken. The other adjusted his rifle, his movements tense. Alicia's mind raced. If they found her, there would be no reasoning with them. She glanced at the wolf, which growled low in its throat, its fur bristling. "No," Alicia whispered, pleading silently for the animal to stay hidden. But the wolf's instincts overruled her hopes. It stepped forward, snarling, and bared its teeth at the approaching men. The hunters froze, startled by the sudden appearance of the wolf. One raised his rifle, but the wolf lunged before he could aim, its powerful body knocking him to the ground. The other man shouted, firing a shot that grazed the wolf's side. Alicia's heart dropped as the animal howled in pain, but continued its attack. The wolf's ferocity bought her precious moments. Clutching the baby tightly, she bolted uphill, the sound of snapping branches and angry shouts behind her pushing her forward. Each step felt heavier, but she refused to slow down. Reaching the ridge, Alicia stopped to glance back. The wolf was still fighting, its injured body a blur of motion as it fended off the hunters. Blood matted its fur, but its determination never wavered. The men, realizing they were outmatched, cursed loudly and retreated into the shadows. Alicia felt tears streaming down her face as the wolf turned toward her, limping but victorious. It made its way to her side, exhaustion evident in its every step. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice cracking. With the wolf beside her, Alicia crossed the ridge, leaving the hunters and their malice behind. Emerging from the forest, Alicia spotted the faint outline of a small ranger station nestled on the edge of the trees. Relief surged through her as she quickened her pace, cradling the baby protectively. The wolf, despite its injuries, followed closely, its steps faltering but resolute. As she reached the station, a ranger stepped out, startled by the sight of her disheveled appearance and the baby in her arms. "Help us," Alicia gasped, her voice shaking. The ranger ushered her inside, calling for backup and medical assistance. Inside the station, Alicia laid the baby on a blanket provided by the ranger, finally allowing herself a moment to breathe. The child stirred but remained calm, its tiny fingers curling against the fabric. The wolf collapsed near the doorway, panting heavily. Alicia knelt beside it, her eyes filling with tears. "You saved us," she whispered, gently stroking its matted fur. The wolf let out a low, tired growl, as if acknowledging her gratitude. The ranger returned with water and a first aid kit, helping Alicia tend to the wolf's wounds while waiting for the authorities to arrive. Soon, A team of paramedics and police officers arrived, taking the baby for immediate care and inspecting the wolf from a safe distance. Alicia recounted the harrowing events, describing the hunters, the talisman, and the wolf's unshakable loyalty to the child. The officers listened intently, their expressions a mix of disbelief and admiration. The paramedics assured Alicia that the baby was malnourished but stable, and they would take it to the nearest hospital for further evaluation. Alicia's heart ached as she watched the child being carried away, but she knew it was the right thing to do. As the sun set, casting a warm orange glow over the clearing, the wolf began to stir. Its wounds had been cleaned, and despite its fatigue, it managed to stand. Alicia walked it to the edge of the forest, knowing instinctively that it needed to return to its world. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. The wolf met her gaze one last time before disappearing into the shadows of the trees. Alicia watched it go, her heart heavy yet filled with awe. She had come to the forest to capture beauty, but she left with a story of survival, sacrifice, and an unbreakable bond forged in the wild. Weeks had passed since the harrowing events in the forest, but the memory lingered with Alicia like a vivid dream. She sat at her desk, flipping through the photos she had taken during her trip. Most were of the serene wilderness, but nestled among them were images that told a far more profound story. The baby, safe and calm in her arms, the wolf standing guard, its golden eyes fierce yet full of purpose, the footprints and talisman that hinted at a deeper mystery. Alicia paused on one particular photo, the wolf's piercing gaze as it limped beside her during their escape. The baby, now named Gabriel by the hospital staff, had been placed in the care of a foster family. Alicia visited him often, finding comfort in his laughter and the way he grasped her fingers with his tiny hands. His survival was a reminder of the fragile yet unyielding will to live. The wolf, however, had vanished into the forest shortly after their escape. Alicia often wondered if it was still out there, watching from the shadows, guarding the forest as it had always done.
Weeks had passed since the harrowing events in the forest, but the memory lingered with Alicia like a vivid dream. She sat at her desk, flipping through the photos she had taken during her trip. Most were of the serene wilderness, but nestled among them were images that told a far more profound story. The baby, safe and calm in her arms, the wolf standing guard, its golden eyes fierce yet full of purpose, the footprints and talisman that hinted at a deeper mystery. Alicia paused on one particular photo, the wolf's piercing gaze as it limped beside her during their escape. The baby, now named Gabriel by the hospital staff, had been placed in the care of a foster family. Alicia visited him often, finding comfort in his laughter and the way he grasped her fingers with his tiny hands. His survival was a reminder of the fragile yet unyielding will to live. The wolf, however, had vanished into the forest shortly after their escape. Alicia often wondered if it was still out there, watching from the shadows, guarding the forest as it had always done. On a whim, Alicia decided to return to the forest edge one last time. She stood at the ridge where the wolf had faced the hunters, the breeze carrying the earthy scent of the woods. "Thank you," she murmured into the wind, unsure if the wolf could hear her or if it even mattered. Just as she turned to leave, a faint, haunting howl echoed through the trees. Alicia froze, her heart skipping a beat. The sound was distant, yet unmistakable, a promise that the wolf was still there, still watching over its domain. Back home, Alicia compiled her photos into a story she titled Echoes of the Forgotten. The series gained recognition, not just for its stunning visuals, but for the powerful tale of survival and sacrifice it told. As she closed her laptop, Alicia smiled faintly, knowing that her encounter in the forest had changed her forever. Some bonds, though fleeting, leave an indelible mark, like the howl of a wolf lingering in the night.